The sky above me was cracked open like an ancient mirror, fragments of starlight scattered across the dying world below. My name is William. I had spent too many years fighting in the hollowed-out husks of cities, but nothing had prepared me for what I found in that broken corridor. I stepped over twisted metal and the scorched remains of alien tech. My breath caught in my chest as I scanned the wreckage. The air was thick with the stench of ozone and a faint, almost sweet tang of blood, evidence of a battle fought and lost. That's when I saw her. She lay half buried in the rubble, skin shimmering an otherworldly blue under the flickering neon glow of fractured streetlights. Her hair, pale as the ghost of dawn, fell in tangled waves across her face. Her name was Aubrey, though I wouldn't learn that until later. Her eyes fluttered open as I approached, and for a heartbeat, our gazes locked. Mine full of wary determination, hers a storm of pain and something deeper. She was alien. That much was clear from the slight glow in her veins and the delicate ridges along her temples. But in that instant, the distance between us felt like nothing. Aubrey shifted, trying to sit up, but a shudder of pain rippled through her slender frame. Her clothing, torn and burnt in places, clung to her body, revealing bruises and cuts that made my gut tighten. She looked like a fallen star, battered, but burning with a light all her own. I lowered my rifle and extended a hand. "Don't move," I said, my voice softer than it had been in months. "You're hurt." She blinked slowly, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. Only a faint, ragged breath that told me she was still alive. And that was enough. I crouched beside her, careful not to startle her further. My fingers brushed against hers, and a shiver ran through me at the heat of her skin. She flinched, but didn't pull away. In that fleeting touch, I felt the weight of everything she had lost, and everything I might find in her. The world around us was silent, save for the distant crackle of collapsing metal. It was as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what we would do next. "William," I said quietly, introducing myself because it felt like the right thing to do. Her gaze flickered, as if tasting the name on her tongue. Then, a single word escaped her lips, almost too soft to hear. "Aubrey." It was like a promise, that name. A bridge spanning the gulf between two lives that never should have met. I slid my arm beneath her shoulders, lifting her gently. Her body was warm and impossibly light, though I could feel the strength coiled beneath the bruises and pain. She didn't protest, only let out a quiet, shuddering sigh that seemed to echo in the hollow of my chest. As I rose, cradling her against me, her head came to rest near my shoulder. She wasn't clinging to me, not yet, but there was a silent trust in the way she leaned into my touch. It was a fragile thing, like the flicker of a candle in the darkness, but it was there. I carried her from the ruins, my boots crunching over the debris of what once was. Each step felt like a vow I didn't fully understand. She didn't look up at me. Her eyes were distant, lost in memories or fears I couldn't begin to imagine. But even as her breath faltered and her body sagged in my arms, I felt her presence burn against my skin. A soft, alien glow that refused to be extinguished. We moved through the wreckage together, two broken things in a world that had forgotten mercy. Around us, the night stretched on, and the stars above blinked like silent witnesses to our slow, stumbling dance through the ashes. In that moment, I didn't know who she was or what fate had cast her down from the sky. But I knew this: I would not let her fall again. Aubrey's quiet breaths were the only music in the darkness, and I promised myself that no matter what came next, I would be the one to carry her forward. Her tears would not be lost in the dust, not while I still had the strength to stand. And in the stillness between heartbeats, I realized that this was not the end. It was only the beginning. The night air was heavy, filled with the scent of scorched metal and dying fires as I carried Aubrey deeper into the ruins. Her head rested lightly against my chest, her pale hair catching stray embers in the half-light, and I could feel the weight of her exhaustion with every step. She wasn't clinging to me, but her quiet breaths and the faint shivers that ran through her told me she hadn't let go of life just yet. I moved with care, one arm beneath her shoulders, the other steady against the small of her back, trying to shield her from the broken world around us. Each time my boots crunched over shattered glass or loose rubble, she flinched slightly, her eyes flickering open for just a moment before closing again. The city had become a labyrinth of ruin and shadows, steel skeletons of once proud towers jutting up against a sky fractured by war. I'd seen it all before, the endless gray of humanity's final stand. But with her in my arms, it felt different, like I was seeing it for the first time through eyes that refused to give up. My name is William, and I had fought 100 battles to protect this world. But tonight, my fight was for her. Aubrey's breathing was shallow, each inhale a rasping whisper that made me tighten my hold on her. Her skin was cool beneath my fingertips, the ridges along her temples glowing faintly in the darkness. She looked fragile, but there was a strength there too, a stubborn spark that refused to be extinguished, even in the wreckage of everything she'd known. We moved slowly, the silence around us thick with memories of what had been lost. My thoughts kept circling back to her name, the way she had whispered it like a prayer in the darkness. Aubrey. A name I would carry with me until my last breath. Her fingers twitched as we passed beneath a broken archway, the sharp edges of twisted metal glinting in the flickering light of distant fires. She turned her face slightly, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. I could see the pain etched into her expression, the tremor in her jaw as she fought to stay conscious. "We're almost there," I murmured, though I didn't know if she could hear me. My voice was a low promise, one I wasn't sure I could keep. But I spoke it anyway because in that moment, it was the only truth I had. I could feel her pulse, a fragile rhythm beneath my hand, and I held on to that as if it were a lifeline. Around us, the city moaned and shifted, the groan of collapsing buildings and the distant roar of wind through hollowed streets. I didn't stop. I didn't let myself think of what might be waiting in the darkness ahead. All I saw was her, Aubrey, a flicker of life in a world that had forgotten how to breathe. Her head lolled slightly, her hair brushing against the metal plates of my armor, and I caught a glimpse of her eyes, pale, luminous, and full of something that stole the breath from my lungs. There was no fear there, only a quiet resignation that cut deeper than any blade. She didn't ask me who I was or why I had come. In that moment, none of it mattered. All that mattered was that I had found her, and I would not let her slip away. The wind howled around us, tearing at the remnants of banners and cracked billboards that fluttered like ghosts in the night. I adjusted my grip on her, feeling the strain in my shoulders but refusing to let it slow me down. Each step was a silent vow, a promise etched into the marrow of my bones. Aubrey shifted again, her lips forming a single word that was swallowed by the wind. I leaned closer, my breath catching as I realized she was trying to speak. "Don't," she managed, her voice a broken whisper that barely reached my ears. I paused, my heart thundering in my chest as I looked down at her. "Don't what?" I asked, my voice soft, as if the world might shatter if I spoke too loudly. Her eyes fluttered open, the faint glow in her veins pulsing softly as she met my gaze. "Don't leave me," she breathed, and in that moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. "I won't," I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. She closed her eyes again, a faint smile ghosting across her lips as she drifted back into unconsciousness. I tightened my hold, pressing her gently against me as I pushed forward into the darkness. Around us, the city was a graveyard of steel and stone, but in her quiet strength, I found something worth fighting for. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring or if there would even be a tomorrow for us. But in that moment, with her in my arms and the weight of her trust against my heart, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would not let her down. The darkness seemed endless as I moved through the broken avenues, each step carrying me and Aubrey farther from the battlefield that had swallowed everything we knew. Her weight was slight, but every breath she took felt like a triumph, a fragile echo of life in the silent ruin. My armor was cold against my skin, the hard plates pressing into my shoulders as I adjusted my grip to keep her steady. She didn't stir, her head resting lightly against my arm, silver blonde hair drifting like moonlight with every movement. I could feel the warmth of her skin where her arm brushed mine, a faint pulse of heat that told me she was still here, still holding on. The city around us was a labyrinth of jagged steel and crumbling concrete, shadows flickering in the flickering neon glow of shattered signs. I didn't know where I was leading her, only that I couldn't stop. Each street was a memory of what once was. Shops reduced to hollow shells, apartment towers leaning like tired giants against the bruised sky. I tried not to let it swallow me whole, focusing instead on the steady rhythm of her breathing, the soft rise and fall of her chest as I carried her onward. My mind was a storm of questions I didn't dare voice. Who was she? Really? What had she seen in the final moments before the world fell away? There was no time to ask, no space for answers in the hush of the ruined city. All that mattered was the silent promise I'd made in the cradle of my arms. I wouldn't let her slip away. Aubrey's lips parted in a faint sigh, her eyelids fluttering as if she were caught between dreams and the cold grip of reality. For a moment I thought she might wake fully, her voice breaking the silence around us. But instead, she slipped deeper into that quiet place where pain and memory danced just out of reach. I shifted her weight carefully, feeling the strain in my back but refusing to falter. She felt too precious, too vital to risk dropping, even for a heartbeat. My boots scraped over broken glass and debris, each step ringing like a promise in the night. In the distance, I could hear the low hum of patrol drones, the soft whir of alien machines searching for survivors. I moved cautiously, ducking into the shadows of a crumbling overpass as their lights swept across the street. The machines passed without pausing, their cold, mechanical eyes blind to the small miracle I carried in my arms. I waited until the last glow of their searchlights vanished beyond the horizon, then continued forward, the city holding its breath around me. Aubrey stirred faintly, her fingers twitching against the worn fabric of my armor. I glanced down, my heart hammering as I watched her lashes flutter, silver against the bruised curve of her cheeks. "William?" she murmured, the word a soft thread of sound that barely reached me. "I'm here," I said, my voice a quiet anchor in the darkness. "I'm not going anywhere." Her lips curved in the faintest shadow of a smile, and for a moment the world seemed to pause around us. In that fragile flicker of a smile, I saw something I hadn't expected. Trust. It was a small thing, a seed of something fragile and fierce, but it was enough to keep me moving forward. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of ash and the electric tang of alien machinery. I quickened my pace, weaving through the maze of broken walls and shattered towers. My legs burned with the effort, but I refused to let her go, refused to let the night take her from me. As we moved deeper into the city, the lights of the alien patrols faded behind us, swallowed by the shadows of the ancient buildings. The silence grew heavier, pressing in around us like the weight of memory. Aubrey shifted again, her voice a faint whisper against my chest. "Where are we going?" she asked, the words slurred with exhaustion and pain. Somewhere safe, I said, though I wasn't sure if such a place even existed anymore. I'll keep you safe. She didn't answer, but her fingers curled weakly against my armor, a silent echo of faith in the darkness. I carried her through the ruin, each step a quiet defiance of the chaos that had consumed our world. The city was a graveyard of hopes and dreams, but in that moment, with her weight in my arms and the quiet trust in her eyes, it felt like something more. It felt like a beginning. I didn't know what lay ahead or how long we could outrun the ghosts of this shattered world. But with every breath she took, every flicker of life that pulsed beneath her battered skin, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I wouldn't let her fall. Not tonight. Not while there was still breath in my lungs and strength in my arms. In the silence of the broken city, I carried her forward, and for the first time in a long while, I felt something I thought I'd lost. Hope. The night pressed in around us as I moved carefully through the labyrinth of the dead city, my grip firm on Aubrey's slight form. Her breath was a fragile whisper against the chaos of the world, and I found myself listening to it as if it were a song that might banish the darkness. She shifted slightly, her head tilting back to catch a glimpse of the moon's fractured light filtering through the cracked sky above. For a moment, our eyes met again, hers glistening with a mix of pain and wonder that struck me to the core. My name is William, and though I had walked these ruins 1,000 times before, I had never seen them through the eyes of someone like her. Each broken wall and collapsed spire was a testament to the war that had stolen so much, yet in that quiet moment they seemed almost beautiful, lit by the faint glow of alien fires and the soft radiance of the girl in my arms. Aubrey's voice was a sigh, a breath of sound that slipped past her lips as she tried to speak. "Why did you come?" she asked, her words so soft I almost thought I imagined them. I paused, shifting her weight as I looked down at her face. The delicate angles of her features caught in the glow of a distant, dying streetlight. "Because I couldn't leave you there," I said. And in that simple truth, I felt the echo of something deeper, a promise that had no words but lived in the way my hands cradled her so carefully. She closed her eyes again, her lashes sweeping down like shadows over the pale curve of her cheeks. I carried her onward, my legs aching with the effort, but I didn't let myself falter. Each step was a vow, a quiet defiance of the ruin that surrounded us. Around us, the city was a graveyard of shattered dreams and broken steel, but in her soft breath and the faint glow of her veins, I found a reason to keep moving. We crossed a broken bridge, the remnants of its steel frame arching high above us like the bones of some ancient beast. Below, the river was a ribbon of darkness, the water reflecting the flickering lights of the fires that burned in the distance. I tightened my hold on her, feeling the tremor that ran through her as the wind whipped around us, carrying the scent of smoke and the metallic tang of blood. Aubrey shivered, her head turning slightly as she took in the silent ruins around us. "It's all gone," she murmured, her voice as soft as the wind that sighed through the broken glass. "Not everything," I said, my voice low and steady as I carried her across the bridge, each step ringing out against the steel in the darkness. "Not you!" She didn't answer, but her hand shifted, fingers brushing lightly against my arm, a quiet gesture that said more than any words could. I could feel the warmth of her touch, even through the cold weight of my armor, a reminder that she was real, that she was still fighting to hold on. The city beyond the bridge was a maze of alleys and half-collapsed towers, shadows stretching long and silent in the flickering light. I found a narrow passage between two shattered buildings, the walls leaning close like old friends sharing secrets. It felt safer there, the shadows deeper, and the wind quieter. I paused, leaning against the cold stone as I shifted her in my arms. Her eyes fluttered open again, silver blue and glowing faintly in the dim light. "I don't want to be a burden," she said, her voice so soft it was almost lost in the sigh of the night. "You're not," I said, my voice firm even as my heart twisted in my chest. "You're not a burden, Aubrey. You're a reason." Her eyes widened slightly, the faintest hint of color rising in her pale cheeks, and for a moment, the ruin around us seemed to fall away. I didn't know if she understood the weight of those words, but I meant them with everything I had left to give. I shifted her again, careful not to jar her injuries, and pressed forward into the darkness. Each step was a quiet victory, a small defiance of the world that had tried to break her. The air was colder here, the wind sharper as it whipped through the narrow alleys, but I held her close, her warmth a beacon against the night. She didn't speak again, her head resting lightly against my arm, but I could feel the quiet strength in the way her fingers curled weakly against my side. We moved through the darkness together, two souls caught in the ruins of a world that had forgotten mercy. And though the night was long and the shadows deep, I carried her forward with a quiet certainty that would not be shaken. In that fragile, flickering hope, I found a reason to keep going. The shadows grew deeper as I carried Aubrey through the hollowed remains of the city, the night around us pressing close like a shroud. My arms ached with the weight of her, but I refused to let go. She was a fragile miracle, a quiet echo of life in a world that had learned only to destroy. The moon had disappeared behind the clouds, and the only light came from the flickering fires that smoldered in the distance, casting everything in hues of crimson and gold. I could feel her pulse faintly against my skin, each beat a quiet promise that she was still here, still breathing. Her head rested lightly against my shoulder, her breath shallow but steady. The silence around us was thick, the city holding its breath as we moved through the maze of broken streets. I could hear the faint hum of alien patrols in the distance, the whir of their machines slicing through the night. But they felt a world away. In this moment, there was only her, and the quiet promise I had made to see her through the darkness. My name is William, and in a lifetime of battles and loss, I had never carried anything so precious. Aubrey stirred faintly, her eyes fluttering open to meet mine. The glow of her veins was softer now, the faint light of her life flickering but unbroken. "Where are we?" she whispered, her voice a fragile breath that slipped between us. "Safe," I said, though I didn't know if it was true. "As safe as I can make it." She didn't answer, but her gaze lingered on my face, searching for something I couldn't name. I wondered what she saw there. If she saw the weariness in my eyes, the quiet desperation that clung to me like a second skin. I didn't care. All that mattered was that she was still here, still fighting to hold on. We slipped through a narrow alleyway, the walls on either side of us cracked and broken like the bones of some ancient giant. The wind whispered through the gaps, carrying the faint scent of smoke and the cold bite of metal. Aubrey shivered, and I tightened my grip on her, my armor creaking softly with the strain. "It's okay," I murmured, my voice low and steady. "I've got you." She closed her eyes, her lashes brushing against her pale cheeks as a faint smile ghosted across her lips. It was a fragile thing, that smile, but it was enough to banish the darkness for a heartbeat. I carried her deeper into the maze of the city, the world around us a blur of shadow and light. Each step was a quiet defiance, a promise etched into the rhythm of my breath. The weight of her in my arms was a reminder of what I was fighting for. Not a mission, not a cause, but a life. Her life. The ruins of the city opened up before us, a wide courtyard ringed by the skeletons of once mighty towers. In the center, a fountain lay shattered, its basin cracked and dry. I paused there, the silence of the place wrapping around us like a prayer. Aubrey stirred again, her eyes opening slowly to take in the quiet devastation around us. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I looked at her, at the way the flickering light of distant fires played across her skin, and I understood. Even in the ruin, even in the ashes of everything that had been lost, there was a kind of beauty, a stubborn refusal to fade away. "Yeah," I said, my voice a quiet echo of hers. "It is." She rested her head against my shoulder again, her breath warm against my neck. For a moment the world seemed to pause around us, the night holding its breath as we stood there in the silence. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, or if there would even be a tomorrow for us. But in that moment, with her in my arms and the quiet strength in her gaze, I felt something I hadn't dared to believe in for a long time. Hope. The city might be broken, the world reduced to ruin, but in her quiet resilience, I found a reason to keep moving. I shifted her carefully in my arms, feeling the faint tremor that ran through her as she settled against me. She didn't cling to me, but there was a quiet trust in the way she rested her head against my chest, a silent understanding that went deeper than words. I carried her forward, each step a quiet promise that I would not let her fall. The night was long, and the road ahead uncertain, but I didn't falter. Not while she was here, breathing and alive in the hollow of my arms. In the darkness of the ruined city, I found a reason to keep moving, and in her quiet breath, I found a reason to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was still a future worth fighting for. The world narrowed to the soft rise and fall of her breath, the way her lashes fluttered in restless dreams as I carried her deeper into the ruins. My arms burned with the weight of her, but I refused to slow, each step a quiet defiance of the darkness that pressed in from all sides. Her warmth was a fragile beacon against the cold bite of the night, a reminder that life still pulsed in this dead city. Aubrey shifted faintly, a quiet sigh escaping her lips as the wind picked up, sending ash swirling around us like pale ghosts. My name is William, and though the weight of her in my arms felt impossibly heavy, it was the only burden I wanted to carry. We moved through a narrow passageway, the walls on either side etched with the scars of battles fought long before our paths crossed. The air smelled of old smoke and something sharper, ozone and blood, a memory of violence that clung to the ruins like a shadow. I felt the tremor in her body, the way her fingers twitched against my arm as if reaching for something just out of reach. "Almost there," I murmured, though I didn't know where there was. My voice was a quiet promise, a thread of sound that bound me to her in the silence. She didn't answer, but her head turned slightly, her cheek brushing against the battered metal of my armor. It was a small thing, a moment that would have meant nothing to anyone else, but to me, it was everything. I carried her up a crumbling staircase, each step a careful negotiation of broken stone and twisted rebar. The city was a graveyard of dreams, but I moved as if it were sacred ground, every breath a prayer that I wouldn't let her fall. At the top of the stairs, I found what I had been searching for, a small room, its walls still standing against the ruin, a faint glow of alien light spilling from a shattered window. It wasn't much, but it was shelter, a place to catch our breath in the endless night. I set her down carefully on a slab of broken concrete, her body sagging with exhaustion as I knelt beside her. Her eyes fluttered open, silver blue and shimmering with pain as they met mine. "Why?" she whispered, her voice a raw thread of sound. "Why me?" I reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, my fingers gentle against the bruises that marred her delicate skin. "Because you're still here?" I said, my voice low and certain, because you're worth saving. She closed her eyes, a single tear slipping down her cheek to vanish into the dirt and ash. In that moment, I saw her, not as an alien, not as a survivor, but as a person who had lost everything and still managed to breathe. I took a breath, the air sharp in my lungs as I searched for the right words. I've seen a lot of things die in this city, I said softly, but I won't let that happen to you. Her lips curved in a faint, broken smile, the kind that spoke of pain and hope in equal measure. She didn't speak again, but the way she looked at me said enough. I shifted, pulling a battered canteen from my pack and pressing it gently to her lips. She drank in slow, careful sips, each swallow a quiet battle against the exhaustion that weighed her down. When she finished, I wiped the last drops from her chin with the edge of my sleeve, the simple intimacy of the act cutting deeper than any wound. The wind howled outside, rattling the walls and sending dust swirling through the room, but in that small shelter, it felt as if we had carved out a world of our own. Aubrey leaned back against the cracked wall, her eyes half closed as she watched me with a quiet intensity that made my chest tighten. "You're not like the others," she said softly, her voice a thread of sound that barely rose above the whisper of the wind. I shook my head, my fingers tightening around the canteen as I met her gaze. "Neither are you." She looked away, her breath catching in her throat as a shiver ran through her. I reached out, my hand warm against her arm as I steadied her. "Rest," I said quietly. "I'll watch over you." She hesitated, her eyes searching mine for a moment before she nodded, the faintest flicker of trust in her gaze. As she closed her eyes and drifted into sleep, I settled beside her, my rifle resting across my knees as I watched the shadows dance in the dying light. Outside, the city moaned and shifted, the ghosts of the past whispering through the broken towers. But in that small room, with her quiet breaths filling the silence, I felt a fragile peace settle over me. I didn't know what waited for us in the darkness beyond, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would not let her fall. The darkness pressed in like a living thing, the city's ruin echoing around us as I kept my vigil beside her. Aubrey slept fitfully, her breaths soft and shallow, each one a fragile thread that held her to this world. My fingers brushed against the cool metal of my rifle, the weight of it a familiar comfort, even as I watched the rise and fall of her chest. The wind rattled the broken windows, a hollow chorus that sang of all we had lost, but I refused to let it shake the quiet certainty that had taken root in my chest. My name is William, and in that moment I was no longer a soldier or a survivor. I was simply a man who had found something worth protecting in the ashes of a world that had forgotten how to love. Aubrey stirred in her sleep, a faint whimper slipping past her lips as she shifted against the cracked wall. I reached out, my hand hovering just above her shoulder before I let it rest lightly on her arm, the simple touch enough to chase away the worst of her nightmares. She relaxed beneath my hand, her breath evening out as the shivers that racked her slender frame began to fade. I didn't know what dreams haunted her, what memories flickered behind her closed eyes, but I knew the weight of fear, the way it could hollow you out from the inside. I had lived it, and I would not let her face it alone. The hours slipped by in a haze of silence and half-remembered prayers, the night outside stretching on like a promise we might never reach. I kept my eyes on the shadows, the barrel of my rifle trained on the darkness beyond the doorway, but my thoughts never strayed far from her. Aubrey was a quiet flame in the cold night, her presence a reminder that there was still something here worth fighting for. She stirred again, her eyes flickering open to meet mine. "William," she breathed, her voice raw and soft, as if she were tasting the shape of my name on her tongue. "I'm here," I said, my voice steady even as my heart stumbled in my chest. I'm not going anywhere. She blinked slowly, her gaze searching my face with a quiet intensity that made the world around us fade into nothing. "Why me?" she asked, her voice a thread of sound that barely rose above the hush of the wind. I hesitated. The words caught in my throat as I looked at her. Really, looked at her. The faint glow of her veins, the delicate curve of her cheek, the quiet strength in her eyes, even now. "Because you're still here," I said finally, my voice a quiet vow that settled in the space between us. "Because I couldn't leave you behind." Her lips parted, a shiver running through her as she reached up with trembling fingers to brush against the edge of my sleeve. "I was so sure no one would come," she whispered, her voice breaking on the last word. "I did," I said, my hand closing gently around hers. "I'm here." A single tear slipped down her cheek, glistening in the dim light like a fragment of a star. I caught it with my thumb, the simple act and unspoken promise that I would not let her fade away. She closed her eyes, her breath catching as she leaned into my touch, the faint glow of her veins casting a soft light across the shadows of the room. For a moment, the ruin around us seemed to fall away, leaving only the quiet space between two hearts that had found each other in the darkness. "Rest," I murmured, my voice a low command that was also a plea. "Let me carry you a little longer." She nodded faintly, her hand slipping from mine as she settled back against the wall, her breaths slow and even once more. I watched her as she drifted back into sleep, the weight of her trust a quiet fire in my chest. Outside, the wind howled, and the night stretched on. But in that small room, I felt something I had almost forgotten. Hope. I didn't know what waited for us beyond these walls, what dangers lurked in the shadows of a world that had been broken 100 times over, but I knew this. I would not let her go, not while there was breath in my lungs and strength in my arms. She had become my purpose, my promise in the dark, and I would see it through to the end. In the silence of the ruined city, I kept my watch, my heart beating in quiet rhythm with hers. And though the world outside was nothing but ash and ruin, I felt the spark of something new, something worth fighting for. In her quiet breaths and the soft glow of her life, I found my reason. And in that fragile flicker of light, I found my strength. The dawn was a promise that had yet to be kept, the first light of the sun a pale glow against the horizon as I shifted my grip on the rifle and looked out across the ruins. Aubrey still slept, her breaths a soft cadence that anchored me to this moment, to the fragile hope that had taken root in the night. My name is William, and though the world had been torn apart by war and betrayal, I knew that as long as she drew breath, there was still something worth fighting for. I watched her for a moment, the faint glow of her veins shimmering in the half-light, a testament to the life that refused to be extinguished. Her features were soft in sleep, the lines of pain smoothed away in the fragile peace of dreams. I reached out, my hand hovering just above her cheek before I let it fall back to my side. She was more than a mission, more than a burden to be carried. She was a promise, a vow I had made in the quiet of the night. The world outside was waking slowly, the distant rumble of alien patrols a muted threat in the cold dawn air. I knew they would be searching for survivors, for the remnants of resistance that still flickered like embers in the dark. But for now, in this small, broken room, we were safe. Aubrey stirred, her eyes opening slowly to meet mine. There was a question there, a flicker of fear and wonder that mirrored the chaos in my own heart. "William," she whispered, her voice a quiet tremor in the silence. "We can't stay here." "I know," I said, my voice steady even as the weight of the truth settled heavy in my chest. "But you're not alone anymore." She blinked slowly, her gaze drifting to the shattered window where the light of the new day filtered through the dust and smoke. "Where will we go?" "Somewhere they can't find us," I said, though I knew the words were a fragile hope at best. "Somewhere we can start again." She didn't answer, but the faint curve of her lips was enough. I shifted, slinging the rifle across my back and kneeling beside her. "Can you stand?" I asked, my voice gentle but firm. She nodded, the motion small but resolute. I slipped an arm around her shoulders, helping her rise to her feet. Her legs trembled beneath her, but she didn't falter, her hand gripping my arm with a strength that belied her fragile frame. Together we stepped out into the cold dawn, the world beyond the door a maze of shadows and light. The city was waking around us, the air sharp with the scent of smoke and the distant hum of alien engines. I kept her close, my eyes scanning the ruins for any sign of movement as we made our way down the cracked steps and into the street. The wind whipped around us, carrying the promise of another day, another chance to keep moving forward. Aubrey leaned into me slightly, her breath warm against my neck as she whispered, "Thank you." I didn't answer, only tightened my grip on her as we moved through the rubble. Each step was a quiet defiance, a promise that I would not let her go. The city was a graveyard of memories, but in the soft glow of the dawn and the quiet strength of her presence, I found something worth holding on to. We moved carefully, each step measured and deliberate as we navigated the broken streets. The world was still dangerous, still filled with the ghosts of war and the cold gaze of the machines that hunted in the shadows. But in that moment, none of it mattered. All that mattered was the quiet trust in her eyes and the faint, steady beat of her heart beneath my hand. We paused at the edge of the square, the remains of a fountain glinting in the early light. Aubrey turned her face to me, her expression a quiet question I couldn't put into words. "I don't know what comes next," I said softly, my voice rough with the weight of everything we had lost. "But I promise you this. I won't let you fall." She nodded, her fingers tightening around mine as she took a careful breath. "I believe you," she said, her voice a quiet echo of the trust that bound us together. The sun rose slowly, casting the broken city in hues of gold and crimson. In that light, the world seemed to hold its breath, the promise of a new day shimmering in the dust and ruin. And as I stood there with her, the weight of her trust in my hands and the quiet certainty of my promise in my chest, I knew that whatever waited for us in the days to come, we would face it together. In the fragile light of dawn, with the ruins of the world at our backs and the promise of something more before us, I took her hand and stepped forward. We were two souls bound by a moment of grace in a world that had forgotten how to hope. But in that quiet, fleeting moment, we remembered. And that was enough.